Any other calls?
Mr Chair.
Marama Fox.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, given that this piece of legislation is going to have a great impact on a number of young Māori children, that in fact a majority of the people from which this is targeted will be Māori, you would like to think that a government support party, who is the Māori Party, who represent the aspirations of Māori people, would also support this legislation. And I wish I could say that that was the case. I truly do wish that that was the case, because the intent of the bill, we absolutely support. The intent of the investment model, we absolutely support. If this is to reduce the numbers of young people who are going to be long-term beneficiaries, have no issue with that whatsoever, because we do want to have an aspiration where our people are not codependent on the government. But we are talking about the very most at-risk group of young people. And what we have done, which we spoke with officials today to get some satisfaction around some of these sanctions. And I have to say that I was happy with a majority of the answers, given that we were able to make a couple of suggestions, like face-to-face contact. There's a remarkable idea, face-to-face contact before someone is actually removed from the benefit. That would be good, because prior to that was 3 strikes, a phone call and a letter. Well, I know if I get a phone call to my cell phone that has an undisclosed number on it, I'm not answering it anytime soon, because it probably means that there's something going on, some sort of trouble. I'm like, I don't want to know. I put it over there in a box. I know that that's what our young people do. And a letter that may or may not go to the right address, that they may or may not see in any time soon, that they may or may not read, is how they're going to be notified that they're off. And then we asked about what is the follow-up. So you kick someone off and then what? Nothing? No, actually, we'll go and see them in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, when they've had no benefit. What are we going to do there? Well, let's fall into some more criminal behaviour, or to potentially criminal behaviour, to try and sustain yourself. Now, if these are the most at-risk people, I would think that it does not stop. And in fact, we've now been given some satisfaction that within 5 days, we've asked for, that would be followed up face-to-face yet again. And so actually there are a number of things here that I support. But I cannot support the fact that we will hold a different yardstick to these most at-risk vulnerable people than we do to a 20-year-old who has a child. A 20-year-old doesn't have to go back to work obligations or training until their child is 3 years old. And yes, Mr. Jono Naylor has pointed out that they did everything they could to have one of the parents stay home with their children, because they realised that that was important. Well, what a luxury that is. What a luxury that is. It is a luxury, but actually it's an investment, isn't it? Mr. Naylor would say that that was an investment in their child's future to ensure that they had the best start. Well, why are we not offering these most at-risk young people the same opportunity to put that emotional investment of bonding into their child and give them the choice? Not the yardstick or not the beating stick that we will threaten them with, threaten them into compliance. Give them the choice. Have some real belief in their own aspirations that they may want to do that. But if they don't, why are we forcing them to go back to training at 6 months? Now, some of the most hideous crimes committed against children in this country have been carried out by people who did not form a bond with their babies, who did not form a bond and were under stress because of the impoverished conditions that they may have been in, or from drug and alcohol abuse, or a number of things. But when you are a young person who is already struggling and you add more struggle on top of them by forcing them to take their baby at 6 months old and do all the things you need to do by yourself to get to your course or to get to your job, It is hard and it hurts, and we struggle with that. Our young people in this country who are the most vulnerable, we've all heard, Mr. Chair.
Member Fox.
The young people who are the most vulnerable people in this country, we are holding them to a different standard of more control, of more pressure. I understand that the youth services want to try and make the change in these young people's lives. But that child, if you are putting those young people under stress with those young children, you are adding to their pressure. Sorry, Mr. Chair. The pressure is being heaped upon these young people who now have to have a whole nother standard that they have to live up to, or they will have portions of their benefit taken away from them. And that is a threat and a stick, and not the way we raise our young people to ensure that they can care and nurture for their children and grow a bond where they do not, in a moment of stress, in a moment of panic, turn around and inflict harm and violence on these young babies. We all know what it's like to go sleepless nights while we raise and feed our children. And what if those mothers are feeding their children? Are they now going to have to go to the school toilet somewhere to express? Are they now going to have to do that in a public toilet if they are working? Or should we just not bother to let them have the luxury of continuing to feed those children as they grow and strengthen and continue to build that bond? We are missing something in this country when our young people are being slaughtered through child abuse, when our young children are their lives are being taken. We are missing something, and that is not about separating our children from their parents. It's about strengthening that relationship together. And I understand that there are parenting courses and all of those sorts of things, but it's not just the parent that raises our children. And for Māori communities, it has to be extended whānau that are involved. We need to think about the family unit as a whole and not the parent in isolation. And yet that is what we are doing. So I wish, I do, that I could stand and support this bill, but for that reason alone, despite a number of other concerns that we have, I simply cannot. And I find that quite distressing, considering this is going to impact young Māori people more than any other group, that this is going to be targeted to young Māori parents more than any other group, that these young Māori babies are going to be subjected to the stress of being hauled around from pillar to post. And I know what that's like many of the others. It is hard, it is stressful, and I do not believe that this alleviates that stress. I believe that it is adding to that stress. And for that reason, beyond a whole raft of others, is the simple reason that we cannot support this today. It goes against the very human rights of our country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Can I just